All right, welcome back. And this is part two of creating a multiplayer connection between our Godot games here. Last time we left off kind of abruptly there, but I ran into some recording difficulties. But it was a good spot actually because we were set up with now two players on the server, and we ran into a bit of a problem though. On the client, you'll notice that there is no players whatsoever. Also on the server, that I can control both of my players with my arrow keys. They both jump at the same time. So while we had some communication in the fact that when I clicked join on this screen, a player was immediately created on this screen, we are far from um, getting this to be a workable solution. Sorry, we are. It doesn't look like we're anywhere near a workable solution. Luckily, we're not that far away from creating some basic workable multiplayer setup. So the issue is, as you can see here, when when a new peer connected, that was that line we put in here on my host button. When a new peer connected, we added a player character. But again, this is only happening on the server. So no clients are actually being created on the, or no players or anything are being created on the client's job machine. So that's where we need to move to next, is to figure out, well, how do I keep these things set up together? And luckily, Godot, this is one of our new features and a new node in Godot that makes this way easier than it used to in the past with standard multiplayer communication. Um, so they've added for spawning, because this is something that happens kind of out of sync. One of the issues is, just think about a client, is that when the client joins, the server is already sitting there and has a player. Or maybe you are playing a game with 6 of your friends and you're the last person to join. Well, how do I know how many other players are communicated and how many should be spawned on my machine so that our machines keep in sync, basically? And fortunately, we have got a really nice node that Godot developers have created for us here. And if we type our multiplayer, um, just type multiplayer, we have a new node called a multiplayer spawner. This is a super powerful kind of cool node here. Notice what it says here: automatically replicates spawnable nodes from the authority to other multiplayer peers. And we'll talk about authority a little bit later, but at the moment you can think of the authority as being the server. That's the person who's keeping control of everything. So this is exactly what we want. We want the spawnable nodes. We want nodes that are supposed to be being created spawned across all the other multiplayer peers. So I'm going to create that there. And this is my multiplayer spawner. Notice a child of multiplayer here. So the first thing I see is there's a little arrow. Let's fix that, or a little error. Let's fix that. A valid node path must be set in the spawn path property in order for, in order for multiplayer spawner to be able to spawn nodes. So basically, what it needs to know is where are we creating these spawnable nodes? And if you'll remember, at the moment, it's being set, the new spawnable nodes, and the only spawnable nodes we have are the players that are being created. They're being created just as children of the multiplayer node. So that's an easy fix here. We'll go and bring up some of these properties here. So the spawn path it's looking for, all I have to do is click that. It will bring up my whole tree, and I'm just going to say, well, the things I'm going to be looking for is where new things are being spawned here. And the other thing we have to do is, so that's going to basically accompany everything. You can see my error is now gone there. So, but I don't want everything. Already we have a lobby. That's not something that's being spawned, and the level 1 isn't being spawned at the moment. The only thing being spawned is players, is a new player that needs to be created. And later on, we may want to add other things that get spawned there as well. But in this case, it's just the players. So right below, we've got a auto spawn list on this multiplayer spawner. So this is what's going to look like look at this list to say when something new is created, and it could be a bullet, it could be a new player, it could be power-ups, it could be all sorts of stuff. When something new is created, if it's in this list, I'm going to make sure that it gets created all over the place on all peers that are connected. So I need to add here an element. So my first thing I'm going to add is, and if I just click list, I'm going to say, well, the player is the first thing. I don't have any other scenes that are getting created. So I'm going to make sure that I put the player on the auto spawn list. And that's it. And it's an amazingly quick, beautiful little node that Godot has created to say, hey, let's keep everything tight and organized and synchronized. So if I now play that scene again, well, then we have here I can do my host, and that should be, I'll move those guys over a little bit so we can see it there. Here we go, and we create it. And now if I join on that one, then you can see that we have a problem. It did not solve my issue. All right, let's figure that out. I did see a flash. I don't know about you, but I saw a flash in the corner where our things were supposed to appear. A little problem there. I'm going to run that again, and I think I see what the problem is, and rather than fix it in a weird way, I'll fix it in the proper way here. In fact, they are both there being created, but there's a little bit of a problem, and I think you'll see it in a second here. So I am going to host here, so you can see there's my host, just drops down. And when I join, I should see on the host another one appear, which I will, but I want you to watch really carefully when I join here on the client, and I want you to see, because they should be spawning right about here, and you're going to see a little bit of an issue. Hopefully it catches it on the recording. I click join, and choom. I don't know if you saw that really fast. I saw two of them whip across. If I did some printing as to their location, I think you'd see there's actually two on here, but they're flying off to the side. And that has to do with, you can see here, we've got these two stuck together. They are now in sync. But on the host one, it was already sitting down here, and then I spawned a new client up above here at the same spot, and you can see it dropped on top of each other. The issue on the client is it is trying to spawn both of those together, both the host and the client. They're trying to spawn them at the same spot, and that is part of the issue. So they're actually colliding with each other, and I think that's why it raced off to the side. And they're basically spawning on top of each other, and Godot doesn't like that. I could spawn them at some random locations, which would solve that issue, but I have a better solution, which is to bring in our next part of the multiplayer syncing or connectivity, because just because they've been created, that's great, but then when we move, I want to make sure that when I move the host on the host one, that it also moves on the client, and when I move the client, it also moves on the host. Which, because just because we have two of the same players doesn't mean our game is very useful at all. We'll have a couple of steps after that, but let's move on to the next one, which will also solve this issue, is that we don't just need to indicate that they're spawned and that the same objects are on both games. We also want to make sure that they are in the same position or the same spot. And that is another amazing thing that Godot has just developed in Godot 4, which is to be able to keep the games in sync, or certain things in the games in sync. And for this, I'm not going to put it here because I don't want to keep everything in sync, but we would put this on, say, our player, because I want to make sure that the players on both ones are synchronized. And so I am going to add a new node here, and you'll see right below that multiplayer spawner, we also have what's called a multiplayer synchronizer. And if I click on this, it tells me a little bit about it. Synchronizes properties from the multiplayer authority to the remote peers. So this is a very cool issue here. it basically allows us to, depending on what we want to synchronize properties between games. And in this case, I want to know where the players are or the player's position. But we could also do it later on. We could, let's say, if you had some ammunition or a health or some variable between the different players, we could create that there and keep it synchronized. So I am going to create a multiplayer synchronizer. This has a couple little features here. The root path, the replication interval, you could say how often you want it to synchronize. In this case, I'm using game speed, so 60 times a second. Some other stuff we don't need to worry about, but we get this little window down here, which also appears when we add a synchronizer to say what properties we want to sync. So I am going to click Add Property to Sync. I want a node to synchronize. In this case, it is the player. And you'll see we get all of the options, all of the properties for the player that we could sync. And if you added or exported a variable, you could synchronize that as well. Down here, I'm looking for the node TD. I'm looking for the position. That's what I want to maintain sync with. But you could also do rotation, scale. All the properties here could be synced. In this case, I only care about where it is. And you can see we now get this property. We have an option here for both spawn and sync. That should be self-explanatory. Basically, do I want to synchronize this property when it spawns? And that you will take care of that problem of the two colliding with each other. And also, do I want to sync it throughout the game? And yes, I do. So, and that's it. That's all you have to do. Now, if we play our game right now, you will see, and we're not quite done, but we'll have to do that in our third video, I think. You'll see that now with that multiplayer synchronizer, it will take care of that issue for us. If I host, we can see my host pops up there. If I join, you'll see, oh, we get 2. And notice the host was already there. It was in its correct spot. And now, if I am on the player, here you can see that if I move here, that it moves in sync and in tandem over here. You will see there's a bit of a problem here. I can't move on the client. And again, we'll take care of that in our next video. But if I move, I am now controlling both of these and they are staying in sync. And you can see there's a little bit of a jaggies there because I'm controlling both at the same time. We get a little bit of a lag. But essentially, it's because this is communicating with the client that it should be moving and syncing its position. And you now have multiplayer communication. Now, the only problem is that they're not controlling their own. And that will be our next video, talking a little bit about authority and who gets to decide who moves who.